Hey moms, it's Nakimi. Welcome to the channel and space for single moms, navigating motherhood, and as always, we do not bash the baby daddies because, well, we are here now. So today, guys, I want to talk about generational trauma, and I really hope that you guys lock in with this video, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you have not already. So guys, with generational trauma, there are a couple of things that fall under the umbrella. I'm not going to list them all, but just a few is racism, genocide, slavery, domestic violence, growing up in poverty, oppression, and as I stated, countless others. And the way that I like to kind of look at generational trauma and what it does to, or how it contributes to single motherhood. Generational trauma is to single mothers what racism is to Black Americans. Because like when you think about racism and systemic oppression, you think about how it impacted us mentally, financially, from a socioeconomic standpoint, right? That's the same with trauma. Because with racism, we already know how far behind we are collectively. We know how hard we've had to fight to still not really be seen as being worthy in the room even today, right? That's where you get the microaggressions, right? Or when you move into a predominantly white neighborhood, and you kind of get the looks, right? Or you have to learn how to code switch in corporate America. Like, we're still feeling the effects of it. And although this generation was not in slavery, like we weren't out there picking cotton and getting whipped, right? We're not even in the civil rights era where, we couldn't vote, right? But we're still feeling the impact of it. Like, we still feel the effects of it, right? So that's how I look at trauma, and I want you to look at trauma with being a single parent. Trauma often stems from childhood, and they say a person's personality is developed within the first 10 years. It's shaped by, their environment, how they're raised, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you've experienced trauma as a child, it's carried over into your adulthood. It impacts your decision making. And, we as people, we like to focus on the outcome of the decision, right? And then we say, oh, well, that was a good idea. Or if, the outcome was bad, well, that wasn't wise. What made you do that? But I don't think we really stop to focus on how our brains function and what contributed to our mind not thinking as smart or not making as wise of a decision, self-destructing behaviors. We never stop to really think, why are people choosing the way that they choose, and like what goes through your mind. And so I want you to think back to, the night that you conceived your child, and ask yourself, what made me take off my clothes, climb in bed, and lie with this man and not require that he use protection, or you be on some type of birth control, some form of contraceptive. Like, why in the moment didn't you think about, wait, I'm not ready. I know what happens when we do and we don't protect ourselves. I'm young. I'm still becoming a woman myself. So maybe we should use protection. Right? Because not every teenager that, becomes intimate, some of them are responsible with it, right? College kids, that some of them are responsible with it. Like, not everybody just does it willy-nilly, right? But you got to really think about that. So there are a few things that could be going on. Either you lack self-love, which stems from some type of trauma, right? And or you lack the guidance. But it's all under the same umbrella of trauma, right? Because if no one really sat down and gave you game and taught you about the birds and the bees and really poured into you, right? You have a high chance of just being irresponsible when you do the do, right? Or you'll see it where girls that don't have their dad can often sometimes become promiscuous. Like they'll start being intimate at an early age because they're seeking male attention. And they believe any little bitty thing that a boy whispers in their ear. And they're often, they may like to date an older boy. So maybe she's 15 and he's 19. You'll see that. Not always, and sometimes that's the case because her dad wasn't around to show her or guide her or be there to meet this young boy. He didn't have a firm grip on her. Yep. And if you did not have your daddy in your life, or he abandoned you, of course, you're liable to have abandonment issues and or daddy issues. And daddy issues can show up as being a doormat. You're overly submissive to your man, and that can look like, we already have a kid or two, we're struggling, but he just refuses to use protection. So I'm just going to go along with it. I don't want to press the issue because I don't want him to leave. Right? Yep, it sure can. So just think about that. And the first thing with trauma and healing it is you have to identify your trauma. Because by identifying your trauma, there are certain things that are called triggers. Right? So like if you grew up in a house where, you saw your mom and dad fight all the time, whether it was physically or verbally, someone yelling at you or someone trying to give you stern advice, it can be a trigger because you maybe don't like the tone. Right? Or if one of your parents abandoned you and now you're in a relationship, you don't really want to rock the boat and you become a people pleaser because you hope that man doesn't leave you. Deep down, when he leaves, you don't know how to deal with it. That's why people be sliding down the walls, playing them same old sad love songs on repeat. And, they just get into their head about it. They lack the ability to use their emotional intelligence, and they don't know how to practice the art of detachment. Yep. And we like to throw out, the woman is the prize, or he that finds a wife finds favor in the Lord. But for a while, for many years, women have been acting like a man is the prize or marriage is the prize, right? Because the first thing people do when they cheat, they want to know what the other girl looks like. They want to know, why not me? Why am I not enough? Right? Crazy. But it's the truth. You may have grown up where, your mom yelled all the time, or she was one of those moms that what they call today loud and ghetto, And you may be exhibiting some of those behaviors. Crashing out is the new term, going off was the term back then, or at least when I was growing up, Or maybe you were raised by a single dad and, he was out chasing women. Or he still ruled with the iron fist. Sometimes they can be very overprotective of their girls or not let them do anything and be very strict because, dads don't want to be embarrassed by the little girl. They'll say it quick, we're not raising no 304s, Yep. You got to think about that. And then sometimes with in the family, when you're keeping secrets, that one uncle that has touched several of the nieces in the family, but we sweep it up under the rug because he done got old now. Nobody really wants to say anything because that's grandma's favorite son, or, Nope, we never report that. We don't send that joker to jail. Yep. Secrets in the family is another one. And religious trauma, like sometimes I've heard of women, that are really going through things with their husband, and it may not be like physical abuse, but he's cheated, or, and they have a family now. So she's been taught and been conditioned that, you stay with your husband, you work it out. The enemy doesn't want, families to stay together. That's nothing but a demon that he's dealing with. Whole time, life is dragging her over there. She's losing herself. But the church will make her, will basically gaslight her to make her feel like it's okay you should stay with your husband and pray over him. Because that's what God does. He forgives us. He gives us grace, Yep. So you've got to identify your trauma so that you can accept it, acknowledge that it's happened to you, and reclaim your power. Take your power back. Take your power back. And when you are with a man and he is doing you dirty, like the proof, like you could have all the proof that you need is right there. You saw it for your own eyes, but because you lack self-love, you will lie to yourself, you will soothe yourself, you want to listen to this man lies because you don't want it to be true. But because you may be thinking you're not going to get anything better, you guys have history and you love him so much, you love him more than you love you. And that's a problem. That stems from daddy issues. Yep. Or you went through some type of abuse when you were younger, because that right there, that pain that he's inflicting upon you, that is a familiar spirit. Yep, it sure is. So this is why I'm like such a huge advocate for single moms, getting into therapy and really locking in with your mental health, especially my Black single mothers, because as I said before, if you are a Black American, you've experienced some sort of generational trauma, right? There's conversations we have to have with our young Black boys that our counterparts don't. It's a fact. We've never been able to just walk into a space and be seen as equal or feel that we're equal. We've learned to scan rooms since we were children. We were taught that. Our parents taught us from a place of fear because the world that they knew was not so kind to them. Not here in America. Yep. And then if your mom and your dad were beefing, or, your dad left, there's a high possibility that your mom resents your dad. So you will often see sometimes that they'll lash out on the kids. Yep. Because they're stressed out, and then they realize they didn't think that it was going to be this way. How could the man that they loved and they've given these children to just leave like that? They have no support. They are in fight or flight or survival mode, And so then they try to raise you guys, the best way that they can. They raised us the best way that they can with the knowledge that they had and the resources that they had, but their mental health was way low. It was out of there. They were really sick and they didn't know it. And when we think of mental health, we think of the serious mental illness like schizophrenia or things like that. But no, anxiety, depression, PTSD, a lot of our family members in the generations before us, they went through that and they didn't even know it. Because again, emphasis was never really placed, especially in the Black community, on mental health. So they're just passing down trauma, and we normalize it. We normalize, go get that belt and I'm going to beat your you-know-what. There was no gentle parenting ever even tried. Time out. What's that? They ruled with an iron fist, and some of that was passed down from slavery, beating your kids. And don't be in a relationship and you haven't worked through your trauma and that man then pissed you off. You mad at everybody because you don't even know how to practice emotional intelligence, logical thinking. So you're lashing out at your kids because you're in a bad mood because that man didn't piss you off. Like, that is a form of trauma. And you'll typically see that with women that have grown up where their dads were abusing their moms. So maybe this man doesn't beat you, but he's definitely abusing you emotionally because you can't even control your emotions. You're allowing an argument with this man who's probably dragging you and you don't need to be with anyway to take you away from being emotionally available to your children who depend on you to nurture them. Like, we've got to do better, ladies. Yep, I want us to heal that generational trauma so badly to heal so that our kids won't have to. Yeah. And it can be hard, especially if you did grow up, in a quote unquote toxic environment, and then your parents don't want to take accountability because they grew up in a generation where, I did the best I could. Oh, well, that can be hard. Because you need to be healed. And sometimes that healing comes from, baby, I'm sorry. Let's do better now. And you may or may not ever get that. And understanding that, your trauma was not your fault. There was nothing that you did to make your dad leave. You were never too hard to love. So your trauma is not your fault, but your healing is definitely your responsibility. It's our responsibility to heal. So that our kids won't have to. So that in 18 years, our kids are not out here roaming, confused, self-sabotaging, using unhealthy coping mechanisms like marijuana or popping pills. This fentanyl is killing these babies. Yep. Yeah, reel your kids in close. Keep them with you. Lock in with your babies. If you don't have a man and that's been on your agenda, honey, take it off the list. Move it on down to last right now because you got some healing to do. We've got some healing to do. And even if, maybe you didn't grow up in as traumatic situations, the mere fact that you are a single mom, and especially if your village is small, the fact that you're carrying the load that was meant for two, sweetheart, it's okay to lean in on people. Lean on people, check in with your therapist and, let them know how you feeling for the day. Because it's a lot, it's heavy. It's heavy for two parents to raise kids. So for sure, it's heavy for one. It's a lot. And if you have like a special needs child, oh dear, my goodness. God bless you. God bless you and your babies. Because that's extra tough. That's 24-hour care. But hang on in there. Hang on in there, guys. Hang on in there. But we got to heal this generational trauma. We got to get this off of us. You got to call your power back. And don't sit in your pain too long. Don't let your mental health steady decline because they're just like there are functioning addicts. There are people that function with mental health illnesses and they don't even know it. And mental health illness is when you are not mentally fit. So if you are mentally exhausted or you're feeling some type of anxiety, that is a mental illness that needs to be healed, babe. It really does. Yep. Let's heal. Let's heal for ourselves so that our kids can see healthy examples. Let's heal for ourselves so that our kids can grow and live somewhat of a normal life. Not to say that you're going to be perfect or they're going to go completely unscathed, but let's get further along than our generation, right? We want our children to bust through ceilings that we're only able to bump up our head against. Yep, you can do it. You can do it. But that is what I wanted to talk about today, guys. To my single mommies, as always, you got this. Till next time, I love you guys. Bye.